And now joining us on Book TV on C-SPAN 2 is Eduardo Bonilla-Silva. Professor Silva, what do you teach here at Duke University?
Sociology.
And you are the chair of the sociology department?
I happen to be the chair of the sociology department.
And your most recent book, Racism Without Racists, Colorblind Racism and the Persistence of Racial Inequality in America. Racism Without Racists, what does that mean?
The title gives you a clue about what I'm trying to address in this book, which is the idea that racism goes beyond the traditional views of those people who believe that racism is just about the Klan and the neo-Nazis, and that we need to understand that we all participate in racism in one way or another, and that there is what I call a new dominant prejudice out there, colorblind racism, in which people don't use the ideas and tropes of the past, but new ideas, new jargon, not new language to defend the contemporary racial order.
Can you give an example?
I'm not a racist but, and after the but, people go crazy and say things that they probably believe strongly, but I'm not a racist that is like a buffer and allows them to go wild on racial matters, because that becomes an excuse and a salvation, yeah? Because you can go back to the disclaimer. Didn't I tell you I'm not a racist? Or didn't I tell you some of my best friends are black, therefore I can say all kinds of anti-black things? I also articulate new arguments, new frames that have emerged in this post-civil rights era. And the core of this ideology is something I call abstract liberalism, yeah? So if I want to oppose all the policies we have enacted to alleviate racial inequality, such as affirmative action, busing, and the like, and I don't want to look racist, what I say is something like, I'm all for equal opportunity. That is why I oppose affirmative action, because affirmative action is reverse racism, yeah? So that statement, if you just read it and you're looking for the traditional use of the N-word or things like that, it doesn't appear, yeah? But I contend that it's abstract liberalism, because assuming that we already reach parity and the land of equal opportunity is a mistake. We still have systematic disadvantages in terms of the labor market, the housing market, etc. So again, the person may look non-racial, yet the statement ultimately endorses not doing anything about race inequality.
But what if somebody is simply opposed to affirmative action and not because it's a racial issue?
That what we call, there is a research on that, it's called the principled opposition, yeah? It has nothing to do with race. It's that I don't believe that government should intervene on racial matters. The research on this shows that most of the people who oppose affirmative action, then if you correlate them with the number of measures, they seem to be highly prejudicial on other matters. So opposing affirmative action itself is not the issue, it's the explanation, yeah? It is claiming. So if you say, I oppose affirmative action because I oppose all government intervention. So again, the research has shown that, and this is not that I didn't examine this in my book, but the people who do survey research have documented that the people who oppose that kind of intervention end up saying, but I'm all for government intervention on other matters, yeah? So you cannot have it both ways. If you are against government intervention, it should be across the board. But if you only oppose government intervention on racial or gender affairs, then we have an issue.
When people disagree with President Obama, is it racial?
Not necessarily. I happen to, the last chapter of the book is a critique of the Obama presidency, which I think in a seemingly contradictory way has pushed forward the racial regime that emerged in this nation in the 1970s. I call that the new racism. So the collapse of Jim Crow did not mean the end of systemic racism. It just meant the development of a new regime. So going back to your question, so there is a legitimate opposition, both from the left as well as from the right to Obama, but a lot of the opposition is sort of racially based, elements of the Tea Party, the birder movement, etc., that no evidence. So I can provide all the evidence that let's oppose Obama for the right reasons, but don't claim that you oppose Obama because he's not a legitimate American, yeah? When the evidence clearly shows that that is the case. He is an American, yeah?
When you say the Tea Party, do you find the Tea Party to be racist?
Segments of the Tea Party definitely have clearly shown their face, but they are in the traditional sense of racism. In this book, I address not the 10% of white Americans who subscribe to Jim Crow ideas, yeah, who would be more racialized, more open in their racial views. I address regular white folks, yeah, who want to be beyond race but have not done what needs to be done in America to truly go beyond race, which is the only way that we can eliminate racism from this society is paying serious attention to race. So again, in a seemingly contradictory way, to go beyond race, we have to go through race. We cannot ignore race inequality. Yeah, if black families have 1/20 of the wealth of white families, you cannot claim we're competing in a fair society, because we know that if life is a race and a group of people, blacks, Latinos, begin way behind the race of life, they will ultimately end up losing most of the time. Yeah. So what we need to do is, again, to eliminate race inequality, take race inequality seriously, examine why do we have it, and then develop the policies we need to finally go beyond race. But we cannot just say we are already beyond race. We elected a black president, therefore we reach racial nirvana, because we're not there yet.
So what is a policy solution that you offer?
At the end, I believe that social movements have been central to alleviate and improve race inequality in this nation. Actually, social movements have been central to most of the significant advances of this country in terms of race, class, and gender. So I advocate civil rights activists as well as their allies to go back to the civil rights tradition of social mobilization, of demanding things, rather than what has happened in this nation in the last 30 years, which is that all of us have put all of our eggs in the electoral arena. And elections do matter, but elections ultimately will not and have never been the central way for us to advance our policy debates and concerns, whether it's on gender, race, or class. We need people to be out there and fight the power, so to speak, if we want to achieve race equality.
So, Professor Bonilla-Silva, so we're out there in the street, we're protesting. What are we protesting? What do we want to happen? Do we want higher taxes for whites? Do we want more education opportunities for African Americans and Latinos? I mean, where are we headed?
Okay, so I'm a professor, so my job technically is not to provide the path of how to get to the promised land, but I'm also a person of color, and therefore I have a stake in improving our position. So at the end of the book, I offer my personal views of what needs to happen. And what I say is that either we do enhanced affirmative action, yeah, combined with systematic policing of discrimination, not only the old-fashioned discrimination, yeah, but also new-fashioned discrimination. Let me explain. So we're still, as a society, focused on the overt discrimination, yeah? So when things happen like the murder of Trayvon Martin, we all get alerted that racism has not disappeared, but we don't need the extraordinary event of a Trayvon Martin or the many Trayvon Martins of the world to know that discrimination happens. It happens every day in all sorts of spheres. For example, I go to a store, it happens to me all the time, and often I'm either ignored because the assumption is that I don't have the money to purchase an item, or I'm viewed as a suspect and therefore I'm policed. And I'm policed in a new way. Yeah? Rather than being told, as we were 50 years ago, get out of the store, now I am politely policed. And they ask me, may I help you? May I help you? May I help you? I now go by the rule of two. First time that they ask me, in a nice way, I tell them, I'm just looking. The second time I tell them, yes, you can help me. I'm trying to steal this item. I was wondering if you could give me some pointers about how to accomplish this task. And the response from the clerk is something like, I didn't mean it like that. And I said, yes, you did. If you didn't mean it like that, your response should have been, what are you talking about? Yeah? I travel across the nation lecturing, and when I use this example, many members of the audience, white members, come and tell me, in my store, what we do is this or that, talking clerks, dependents, etc. So there are many ways of this new discrimination affecting us in stores, in neighborhoods, yeah, where like happened to the professor in Harvard when he was in his own house.